always used to lay you clean up the messes. Down on my knees, thought I couldn't stand up on my own. Turns out sometimes you're stronger alone.
My name is Tess. I'm 37 years old. I was a Jehovah's Witness, and I am shunned.
All right, Tess. So how'd you come to be one of Jehovah's Witnesses in the first place?
I was born in, so the classic story.
Okay.
Yeah.
Born in. Do you know where it came from in your family, or like how far it goes back, or was there an initial spark to its involvement in your family that you know of?
Yes. So I'm second generation. My grandparents on my dad's side, they got a knock at the door in the mid 60s. And when my dad was little, and it was the Witnesses, and they were kind of going through a very traumatic time in their life. They had a lot of interpersonal issues. My grandmother's mother, so my great grandmother, was a very controlling, abusive person, and she was continuing to kind of wreak havoc on my grandmother's life and on her marriage and on her child, and she was trying to break up their marriage. So when that knock came on the door, they love bombed them, obviously, but it kind of seemed like this ray of hope, I think, to them, that maybe things could be a little bit better. And they always said that it kind of got their marriage back together and got great grandma out of the picture. So they raised my dad as a witness, and he was 5, and they had my uncle, and he was always a witness. So that's kind of how it started on my dad's side. On my mom's side, I think I have a great grandfather or something that was kind of loosely associated with like the Bible students a long time ago.
Wow, back in the OG days.
Right. So I don't know all the details of that, but I know that once again, they got a knock at the door in, the mid 60s, and it was the Witnesses. And my mom's mom was like, oh, well, come on in and study with my kids, because she kind of had a little understanding about this religion, but she didn't understand that it was damaging. So all of her kids got very involved, but I don't think that my grandfather on my mom's side were too terribly involved. But yeah, that's kind of how it started.
The 60s was a big decade for your family. It sounds like a lot of witness involvement starting to come into the family.
Well, the end of the world was coming.
Yeah, 1975, right?
Yeah. It was really, really coming up fast. So,
well, yeah, and you're post World War II, and people have been traumatized by a lot of things, and everybody's trying to figure out who they are and where to go from here. And then, the Witnesses with their message of 1975, that had to be appealing to a lot of people. Hey, here's another thing to fear. The end is imminent. It's coming. But also you can ride with us and you'll be fine. That's
right. Yeah.
Play on a lot of people's fears and their experiences.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, things in the 60s were just changing so much in general. I mean, even with like the hippie movement and everything, it was probably kind of a scary time for some people.
Yeah.
So
and looking for a utopia, the hippie movement, right? Looking for better days.
Yeah. Kind of a little bit of a religious renaissance, I guess.
Sure.
In a sense. Yeah.
Sure. So then it starts in your family. Obviously it trickles down. You are born into this thing. So what's the worldview that it gave you? Growing up a little Jehovah's Witness girl, how did you feel about life in general? What did you think about the people around you, the world around you?
Well, excuse me. I remember when I was very young. So, in the late 80s and early 90s is, I remember being extremely happy. I remember feeling a lot of love. I loved my parents. I loved my grandparents. I loved my family. And I don't think I really fell victim to a lot of the things that witness kids or ex-witnesses talk about nowadays, which is like, existential dread or, fear of worldly people or anything like that. I think that I was generally a very happy, kind of precocious kid. I loved my religion and I was extremely deeply connected to it. Um, my family basically ran our congregation. My grandfather, so my dad's dad, was presiding overseer in our hall. And all of my extended family were elders and pioneers and ministerial servants in our hall. So I felt extremely connected to it. I knew it was true. I knew it. And I I think it just but here's the thing, when you're a kid, so many things are kind of like it you live in kind of a make-believe world anyway. You know what I mean? So it was easy to just kind of swallow all this and just, believe, yeah, one day I'll be able to pet a lion. And, like it didn't, kids believe in Santa Claus. So, now that I'm an adult, I look back and I'm like, I can't believe that adults in my life believed all this stuff was true. To me, I mean, I can see that it's silly, but I mean, I thought it was great. I believed every word of it. Yeah, and it didn't really give me any real issues at school. It would suck sometimes after Christmas break, when you get back and all your friends have all this cool new stuff and you're just like, hey, I'm back and I'm just me. But birthdays, when the kids would have cupcakes and I would have to leave the room or whatever, it didn't really bother me. I brought my Bible stories book to school and, forced the kids to sit down and read stories with me. And
Scared the other children with the violent stories in the Bible story book.
That picture in the Bible stories book of the flood with the mother holding the baby on the rock,
Yeah.
it never occurred to me how horrifying that is. Like,
Yeah.
maybe I don't know. I just didn't have any bad thoughts in my head, because I was such a happy-go-lucky kid. So it never occurred to me that, hey, that's horrible, But yeah, I was all about making my school my territory. I was the only JW in my school, and I was happy to do it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Do you think so? You said that you grew up, all of the people around you or your family was this kind of pillar of the congregation, so to speak, or, very heavily involved, and you had a lot of people around you who were elders and ministerial servants and maybe pioneers or whatever. Having all of that family around you so closely connected and so deep into it, do you think that kind of maybe even impacted your experience? Maybe it's easier to be a little happy-go-lucky kid having just a bunch of people around you who are all kind of doing the same thing and they all are kind of involved in it? Or do you think that that's maybe more just your natural personality and the way that you're wired and you just happen to be maybe more of a happy-go-lucky person?
I never really thought about it that way before. But that is interesting that you say that. And it might be that so many people around me were all doing the same thing and all seemed happy to be doing it. Because later on in my life, I definitely took dips into deep depression. So I know that I can go I can go both ways there. But yeah, it might have been. We were so immersed in it. I mean, I got to be in a drama at the district convention when I was little. I was a publisher from the time I was 7, giving my own talks and going to my own doors. And I don't know. It all seemed so natural, but maybe that's why, is because everybody around me was so into it. Like, we had no identity outside of it.
Well, yeah. I mean, yeah, that's unfortunate for everybody pretty much, is that becomes your identity.
Yeah.
I just remember always there were certain families that I knew and I would watch, maybe large families that were very well connected. and deep into it and pretty close, real tight families. And they always did seem to have, maybe I shouldn't say always, a lot of times they seem to have a different experience. Whereas my family was, my dad was deep into it. He was an elder, and my mom was very zealous and such. We were just kind of out on an island by ourselves. We weren't really related to anybody. And I would watch these other big families that were related, and they did seem to be having more fun sometimes because they were interconnected. Maybe they even had, not just maybe siblings, but also cousins or whatever who were witnesses in the same Kingdom Hall or around, and they'd have a lot of friendships there that were built in from the family. I think sometimes that can create a little bit of a different experience for those individuals and those larger families that are super connected.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I remember those families too. I mean, we had a lot of those in our hall too that were, there's just, it's such a high school, isn't it? At the Kingdom Hall. It's the clique and everyone else. It's you're either in or you're out. The social hierarchy is really immature. Just really, really immature. Yeah.
It could be brutal at times if you're in the wrong part of that hierarchy.
Yeah, and I've been in both parts. So
yeah, absolutely. Okay, I was just wondering if that was just more your personality or if it was part of just the family and everybody that you had there, because that I think that does sometimes impact the experience of people. And this is your personal experience. So having that family around and seeking that preaching territory at school, did you have a lot of friends at school, or were you ostracized at all because you were trying to make it your territory? Did you fit in there?
I felt pretty happy in school.
Nice.
I was a weirdo because I was a witness, and I'm an only child. So I spent a lot of time around adults. I don't really remember it being much of an issue for me. But it was a different time. I kind of feel like maybe if my kid were doing that today, it might be a little bit different, but I don't know. I feel like I got accepted pretty well. I really had an ideal situation when I was very little. I don't really recall it giving me too many issues.
All right. So did you have friends and feel pretty connected in school? Nice.
Yeah. I had friends in school, and there were girls in the congregation my age that I had to be friends with. I didn't like them, but I had to be friends with them. That time in my life was pretty happy. Yeah.
Interesting, just how you said that you had these friends at the Kingdom Hall that you didn't particularly like. Because you kind of are forced. These are the only people that you can really be true friends with, as they would say. And they are friends of convenience and of geography, proximity. And so those, and I guess you said you were an only child, so then those would have been the people that you had to hang around with for the most part.
Yeah. I feel bad to say this now, just because all of those girls that were in my Kingdom Hall, they were also being indoctrinated into a cult.
Course.
They had
no identity either.
They had no identity either. Yeah. And I think a lot of them are still witnesses. But yeah, it kind of sucks that the people that you really connect with that are outside, I went to school and I had a couple of girlfriends we were really tight and, we connected really well, but I was never allowed to go spend the night at their house. I was never allowed to go to their parties. If I had a party or a sleepover, it had to be with these witness girls who I found obnoxious, but yeah, like you say, these are your prescribed friends, and it's only because they happen to live next to you and go to your Kingdom Hall. I think that's pretty sad. It really stunts your ability to have a I don't know, a grasp on what a real relationship or a real friendship should be like.
Absolutely. Well, when you're
Yeah.
given automatic friends,
Yeah.
you don't learn how to make friends a lot of
Yeah.
times.
Well said.
To know
Yeah.
what you would even want in a friend, because you've never you don't know yourself, first of all. So how would you know who you fit well with
Yeah.
in any kind of relationship? Um,
Absolutely.
so in the Kingdom Hall, were you all, sounds like you were, but were you all a family that was, at all the meetings, super involved, giving all the talks, doing all the things?
Oh yeah. Yeah. We never missed a meeting. We were out in service every weekend. I don't think I got to sleep in until I was like 14. Every day we were doing something. We were doing our family, not, well, now it's called family worship. It was family study at the time. So I don't know. But yeah, we were extremely involved. My mom was a little bit less involved. Now, she was a true believer, but she was extremely depressed. So my dad had a really good job. He So my mom didn't have to work, which was nice for me. But I remember her being in bed a lot. She missed a lot of meetings. She missed a good amount of service. And what I didn't really realize at the time was that she was very depressed because her relationship with my dad was really, really bad. And I guess he had been sort of physically abusive to her. And he had a hard time admitting it. So if he had slapped her or hit her in some way, it would be, well, a demon must have made me do that. You're so nasty that the demons are in the house and they're making me hit you. Or it would be that never happened at all.
The gaslighting.
He wrote the book on gaslighting. So I guess before I was born, they lived in another state, and they got married when they were 18. They were super duper young, classic JW story. And I guess he had been unfaithful to her. He got disfellowshipped when they were teenagers, and he had been reinstated by the time I was born. But she was just really, really unhappy and deeply depressed. My dad is a very charismatic man. He is extremely articulate, and he comes across as incredibly intelligent. And I always thought he was really intelligent until actually just very recently, when I realized that he's not very intelligent. And he just presents very, very well. So my mom would, of course, go to the elders in our congregation looking for help, because that's what you're supposed to do.
Right.
And they would tell her, well, you need to pray more, and you need to go out and service more, and you need to be a better wife. And then maybe he'll stop doing this to you.
So they knew that he was hitting her and such, right? I mean, it's not like she was just saying, my mom went to the meetings a lot, and she went to the elders a lot and would talk about how my dad was emotionally abusive. That's sadly harder to quantify at times. And then when you have someone who's charismatic and presenting one way at the meetings, right? They can't believe that he's this other person as soon as we leave the Kingdom Hall. But when you're talking about somebody hitting you and stuff, that's it seems like something that they would take more seriously, but unfortunately they don't. And too often they put it off on the woman, the wife, to it's your fault. They're participating in the gaslighting. It's your fault. If you were a better witness, if you had sex with your husband more, if you whatever, like, he wouldn't do these things. It's horrible the way women are treated in that way.
It really does. It really does just highlight their attitude towards women in general, doesn't it? Yeah. So I mean, even if they went to my dad about this, he's so good at talking his way out of things. I, he's a salesman, you know, he's a JW salesman on top of that. So, I mean, he could sell, he could sell, you know, paper to a tree. So,
Yes.
he could basically talk his way out of it with them. And on top of that, my grandfather, his dad, was the presiding overseer of our hall. So, I mean, my mom really had the cards stacked against her. Excuse me. And they had met, and my dad's family, they were need graders right before 1975, and they had gone out to the Ozarks, and that's where my mom was from. You know, so my mom, she's very naive. You know, she kind of grew up out in the middle of nowhere. She went from her mom and dad's house to being a wife. She didn't really and then they moved away, you know, about 2,000 miles away. So she didn't even have her family around. You know, she was very, very isolated and
The tool of
incredibly.
the abuser, right? Isolation.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. Yeah. I've never even thought about it like that before, but yeah. She was just surrounded by my dad's family, and they had all the influence and all the power. So yeah. I didn't really realize that things were that bad in our house. My parents hid it from me pretty well. I do remember a couple of times when things got pretty intense. They fought all the time. I feel like fighting in my house was really, really common. Anytime the three of us got in the car to go anywhere, my mom and dad would get into a screaming match. And my dad would drive erratically to try to scare her, you know, just doing really just crazy, mean things. There were a few times that I would, you know, kind of jump in and be like, stop fighting, please just stop yelling, you know, but for the most part, it was extremely normal to me that, you know, I would go in my room and play Barbie dolls, and they would go in their room and scream at each other. Like, this is just my life, you know. You accept the reality in which you're, you know, that you're presented with. So, but there were a couple of times where I do recall things being a little bit scary. One night we were coming home from the Kingdom Hall, and we pulled in. They had been screaming at each other. We pulled into the garage. All three of us got out of the car, and my mom started screaming at me to get back in the car. So I hopped in the car. I think it was maybe 6 or 7. I'm not sure. Pretty young. And she hopped in the driver's seat of the car and just took off. And she sped away. We drove a couple of towns over. She got to a gas station and parked, and she just sat in the car and cried. And I just sat there like, what? I had no idea what was going on. You know, I was kind of like rubbing her arm and going, you don't have to cry. Don't cry. I didn't know why she was crying.
Sure.
What I found out later was that she just was terrified that she was going to receive some kind of abuse when we went inside the house. And probably the weirdest thing that ever happened was one day when I was in my room, I'm playing, and they're in their room fighting. And all of a sudden, my bedroom door just flies open, and there's my dad, and his eyes are this big, and he's breathing erratically, and he's terrified. I mean, he's terrified, and he says, "Come on, we have to go pray. We have to go pray right now." And I'm like, "What happened?" He says, "There's a demon. There's a demon." And I was, "Oh my God!" Like, okay. So he grabbed me by the arm and drug me down the hallway he had my mom's arm in his other hand, dragging both of us down the hallway into the living room, forced us down our hands and knees in a circle. And he prayed to Jehovah to take the demon away, to get the demon out of the house. I was completely shocked. I had no idea what was going on. When he was done praying, he threw himself like face first onto the couch and just started to sob uncontrollably. I had never seen my dad cry before. My mom, during all of this, she didn't say a word. She was blank-faced, stoic. She got up, she went in her room, and she closed the door and locked it. And I was just sort of left there sitting on the floor going, what the hell just happened?
Yeah, your mom's probably dissociating, and
Yeah.
just out of it. Wow, and this little kid being left there.
Yeah. It was bizarre.
It is. I mean, obviously your dad had a lot of issues, to say the least. It's such a contrast. This happy-go-lucky little girl who thinks she's happy and everything is pretty great, and then this harsh reality around her that is very much not great. And perhaps even that happy-go-lucky could have been part of a coping mechanism. Hey, let's
Maybe.
go over here and play pretend. Let's, because that's just hard to. Wow, because you grew up in a very volatile situation. It sounds like. I mean, that's tough to grow up just not only seeing it, though. I know you said you didn't always see it. You saw the arguing, but you didn't know how deep it all ran. That was your norm too. That's what you knew. So you don't know that it could be any other way.
Oh yeah. I thought for sure all kids must listen to their parents scream at each other all day.
Sure.
I mean, I really thought this must be what relationships are. I didn't know, I didn't know that I should not be happy with this, like I said, I mean, kids just accept the reality of what they're presented with, so yeah. And many years later, I think I was in my 30s before I even talked about that day with anyone. We never talked about it again, the three of us as a family. Yeah. And when I got into my 30s, I started thinking about it, and I called my mom and I'm like, hey, do you remember this one day when this thing happened? And she said, oh, I was hoping you had forgotten about that because you've never brought it up. And she says, well, he backhanded me and kind of like recoiled in horror at, what he was doing. And then was like, oh my God, a demon must have made me do that. And he was so committed to that lie that he would run into my room, scare the crap out of me, and do something like very Pentecostal-ish. Like we were 5 seconds from handling snakes, like it was just really bizarre, really bizarre.
Mm. So, did you find that conversation healing in any way, to talk to your mom about it then?
Yeah, I guess I did. It was just really nice to know why it happened. I don't know why it just I just let myself kind of glaze over it. I just kind of glossed over that. It almost makes me wonder what other things happened that I don't even remember because, I guess I just let it go. But it was nice to know that I'm not crazy. This did happen.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a reason for it. And, it kind of was vindicating for my mom in a way. And I guess I'll get into this now. She did end up leaving my dad for abusing her. And he denied it.
How old were you when she left? Where was that in your case?
Oh goodness. Okay. So, this is kind of a tale in and of itself, but I think it's important to tell. And so this all started when I was 9. My parents had been married for 15 years. And my dad, he used to go on a lot of business trips. And so we lived in Seattle, Washington. And he went out to Chicago on a business trip. While he was gone, my mom decided that this was the time that she was going to escape. So she called her brother and his wife in the state that she was from. She was from Missouri, out in the Ozarks. So they came up and helped her pack up our entire house. And the plan was for her and me to go to Missouri and get away from him because she was very afraid of him. So she told me that, we're moving to Missouri and your dad's going to come with us. He's going to come eventually and everything's going to be okay. And I just believe that, I was like, cool. I loved my cousins down there. I was like, this is fantastic. I'm going to move someplace else and be in a new, be around my cousins who are my best friends. So I was fine with just packing up our house and leaving. Now, the really bizarre thing is that while we were packing late at night, a witness drove past our house and just happened to look, look up the driveway and see a U-Haul in our driveway. So the next thing I know, my grandfather and another elder are pulling up the driveway. And I, just went running to him. I'm, Papa, guess what? We're moving to Missouri and Daddy's coming and, so they went inside and tried to talk my mom out of leaving. I didn't hear what was said or anything, but they went running out of the house when my aunt came in the room and started yelling at them, about everything that my mom had been through and how they weren't helping her and they didn't listen to her. And what I was told later was that they said, my grandfather and this other elder said that when my aunt came in the room, they felt a demon come in the room with her. And so they took off.
It's always a demon when a woman stands up for herself, someone else, right? Now it's suddenly a demon. Goodness.
Right. Yeah. Those demons, man, they are tricky.
Those demons. Anytime somebody disagrees with me, it's a demon.
Every
Pretty
time.
Convenient argument.
Right. So they left and my my grandfather just came flying out of the house. And I saw him leaving because I was outside. And I said, bye, Papa. And he turned around and came back to me and he got down on his knee, and he just threw his arms around me in a big hug. And he said, I'm so sorry. And I didn't understand what that meant. It was starting to kind of dawn on me that maybe things aren't as great as I thought they were. Witness kids don't ever think their parents are going to get divorced.
No.
Divorce is not allowed. So it just never even occurred to me that maybe something like nefarious was going on until that moment. So my mom knew she had to get out now. So one of my cousins and my uncle, there's a big group of us. We left and we went to Missouri, which is about a 3-day drive. And my mom managed to buy a house down there somehow. I don't know how. She didn't even have a job. And she enrolled me in the school. And I was perfectly happy with this whole arrangement. I mean, it was, we had always kind of lived in the city and now we were kind of out in the country and it was really beautiful. And, I kind of felt like a big fish in a little pond. And my mom kept telling me, your dad's coming. He's coming. I did get to talk to him on the phone maybe 2 or 3 times. But no one really told me what was going on. I guess my dad, after we had left, he came back from his business trip to an empty house. So I know my dad is not exactly a good guy, but he is my dad. And I do feel bad that he he left his house and he had his wife and daughter and all of his nice stuff. And then he came back and everything is gone. So yeah, that's how she kind of began her escape from him.
Wow. I mean, that's quite a story. It's not just, I mean, honestly, good on her for having the strength to create a plan to get out of that situation. It's because she's protecting herself and you too by default. You know, at the end of the day, your dad is a hurt person. Hurt people hurt people. I don't know what all's in your dad's past or what all's going on there, and you know, that's sad too because he lost his wife and kid. I mean, it's on him. You know, it's squarely on him. But you know, those are the consequences of his actions, and I totally understand why she would need to protect herself. I mean, that took great courage to be willing to do something like that, to move herself and you away. Also probably shows how much fear she had of him for her to be able to do so. And, you know, courage isn't the absence of fear, it's feeling the fear and doing it anyway, right? So I mean, even making this, there's got to be even fear of retribution over making this trip and trying to get away from him. If she's that afraid, she doesn't know what he's capable of. I mean, he clearly was struggling and not doing well in a lot of ways. But that's the elders getting involved.
Yeah.
Like, who do you think you are? You have no boundaries. How do you think that it's your business to get involved in something like this? And you know what's going on. So, I mean, you're culpable too in some of this. This is ridiculous. Good for your aunt too. Stepping in there and saying what needed to be said. Good for her.
Yeah.
A strong lady there.
Oh yeah. Yeah. She's definitely a firecracker. Yeah. And you know, the elders, you know, my mom could come on your show and she could go on and on about her experience with those elders. But you know, at one point she did call the cops. I know at least once they did come to our house. They didn't really do anything. She did go to the elders once and say, "I'm afraid he's going to kill me." And they said, "Well, let him kill you. You'll be back in the resurrection." Right? Oh, dude. Yeah.
I think I've heard that before, but
have you?
That's honestly hard to hear and to not be surprised by, even though you know it exists out there. Let him kill you and then you'll be back in the resurrection. What is that?
Yeah.
How sick do you have to be to say something like that?
I cannot imagine saying that to anyone. I don't know what part of your humanity you have to sacrifice to tell a person, a woman who's clearly in a bad relationship or an abusive relationship, or any person in a relationship like that. That guy, I don't know. The elder that came by our house that night, that was with my grandfather, he was kind of a close friend of ours. And at one point he told my mom, "Hey, I think you guys just need to go get marital counseling." And she said, "Okay." A few hours later, he called her on the phone and said, "Hey, I'm really sorry. I gave you terrible advice. You shouldn't go get marital, because you're not supposed to do stuff like that." You know? So, I mean, even when this one guy felt completely overwhelmed by the problems of my parents and was like, "Hey, the best thing you guys can do is get professional help," he had to take it back, you know, and apologize for his terrible advice. Because you're not allowed to do that. You got to go to the elders. Yeah.
It's the elders who are going to counsel you. The elders are going to make all of this better. The elders, if the two of them would meet with the elders, their relationship could get better, right? Not through professional help, because they know that if you go to a professional, you're going to have to disclose at some point you're one of Jehovah's Witnesses, and they don't want it to come out that you're a witness and that you're in this situation because it looks bad on them, and they would protect their reputation and appearance above a woman's life any day.
Yes. Yeah.
That is very sad.
It is so sad. And it is the reality, I think, for a lot of women in this. And I don't even want to just say women, just people. Women are just as capable of being abusers. But I shudder to think how many people are going through this exact same thing right now.
Well, yeah. I mean, and if it's not at a physical level, it's certainly spiritual. They're all being spiritually abused, mentally and emotionally abused. It's not healthy for anybody. The whole situation's not good. So
yeah,
it's just really sad. So many people are stuck.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So I wish that I could say that this is where everything just kind of got better, but things got worse, Michael. So we went down to Missouri. I don't know how long we were down there, but it was a while. I want to say it was a few months. And I was still just fine with my life. I was a little confused about what was going on, but not enough to, kill my spirit or anything. So we lived in this extremely small town, very, very small town in Missouri. And one day I had my cousins were over, and the three of us were just out in the yard, and we were riding bikes and we were playing, and we had this alleyway back behind the house. So I used to ride my bike around the alley and around the block. And one day I was out there, and there was a car in the alley that I'd never seen before. It was like a red Grand Prix, like 1993. So it had tinted windows, and there was someone sitting in there, and they were holding a cigarette out the window. I literally thought nothing of it. So my cousins went inside, and I got on my bike and just continued to ride around the block a little bit. I rode past that car, and I looked in the car, and I saw that there was a person in there with a hat on. So I just rode past it, and all of a sudden I heard somebody whispering my name. And I stopped, and I turned around, and it's my dad.
Oh, goodness. See? Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So he was sort of crouched down, and he was wearing a hat, and he looked like a private eye. And he was doing this, like, come. And I hadn't seen my dad in months. So I jumped off my bike and I ran to him, and I'm daddy, daddy, daddy. And he grabbed me and threw me in that car, and we took off. Just took off. He left my bike on the side of the road. So it didn't take me too long to figure out that I was being taken. I was being snatched. And then my mom wasn't going to know where I was. So I remember just putting my forehead down on his hand on the gear shifter, and just sobbing and begging him not to do this, begging him not to take me away. And he didn't say anything. I had my little security blanket, my Cabbage Patch Kid, that I took with me everywhere, and I begged him to just let me go back and get it. Don't make me do this. And he didn't say a word. And it felt like it lasted an eternity, but I'm sure it didn't. And we drove down the freeway. I mean, he must have gone 100 miles an hour. And he had bought a pack of cigarettes and held one out the window, because everyone knows that my dad doesn't smoke, so he was trying to disguise who he was.
Wow.
He had thought all this through. So I guess somehow he had figured out where my mom was, and went to the elders about it. and the circuit overseer, and they had all kind of given him their blessing to fly down to Missouri and kidnap me off the street. Yeah.
So,
So
did your mom when she went to Missouri, did she get involved with a congregation there?
oh yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So then through
And
the
my
Witness
uncle was
Network,
an
they
elder
would have been able to have located her anyway, right? Because she tapped back into that network and they're going to say where she is. They're not going to keep that confidential.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm not sure of all the ins and outs of how my dad discovered us, but once he discovered the town we were in, it was really easy to find us because it was so tiny. He went to the police there, and they said, "Look, you guys are married. You're not separated. We can't do anything for you, I guess." So yeah, everybody kind of gave him the the blessing to go out there and do what he did. We drove for a long time, and I remember that we stopped at a payphone because this was before cell phones. And my dad called my mom, and he left a message on her answer machine because my mom had found my bike on the side of the road. Okay. So she was busy. she was looking for me. Can you imagine finding your kid's bike?
Oh, that's horrific. And
yeah,
I can't help but think that he did that for a fact, but
yes. Yeah, this was a control thing. This was saying I'm still in control.
Yes, win at all costs. Win at all costs, including just kidnapping you and taking you back. Yeah, I get it. Like
the
your
ends justify the
property.
means. Yeah. So we stopped at a payphone. He called her, and I heard him leave her a message that said, "I have our daughter. I am going home, and you can come home whenever you want." And he told her that we were going to the St. Louis airport. But we didn't go to St. Louis. We went to Tulsa, which is in the opposite direction of St. Louis. Because where we were was kind of smack dab in between St. Louis and Tulsa. But I have tons of family in St. Louis. So he knew that, and this was pre 9/11. So my aunts and uncles and my cousins and all my extended family were in the St. Louis airport. They were all stationed at Seattle gates, waiting, looking for me. And my mom went to St. Louis. But we went to Tulsa, and it was a long drive. It's like a 3-hour drive. And, I eventually kind of calmed down, and I hadn't seen my dad in a long time, and I loved him. I was a daddy's girl. We had a lot in common. I was very happy to see my dad. I was sad about what was happening, but it was still kind of just nice to be around daddy again.
Sure.
We stopped at a McDonald's, and he got me a Happy Meal, and he let me call my grandparents on a payphone there, and I hadn't spoken to them, in a very long time. So I was very, very happy to, talk to them. And we were going on an airplane, which I loved. So we went to Tulsa, and we flew home to Seattle, and all of our congregation was at the gate waiting for us. Okay. They had balloons that said congratulations. They had flowers. This was really a group effort. I didn't understand. I felt like, oh, they're here to say hi to us, but man, there's a lot of people. And I remember asking my dad, like, why did they bring congratulations balloons? And my dad's like, oh, because they were congratulating me on getting you. And I was like, huh, it's weird.
You're the prize.
Congratulations on completely scarring your daughter.
Yeah.
So after that, I kind of had to move around a little bit. I couldn't just go straight back to my house because I was kind of being sought out by my mom's family and friends that were in the Seattle area. And I was kind of being hidden, around. And you know what? All of this was during the school year. Okay. This was third grade for me. I don't even know how I passed third grade. I have to be honest with you. I don't remember learning anything in third grade, but somehow I passed. So yeah, that's kind of bizarre.
So you said you were being, I mean, the school thing aside, and that's wild in itself. I don't know how you were even able to go to a school or figure out but you said you were being hidden around, like, were you staying with different people in the congregation?
Yes. Yeah.
So different people were housing you as what a way of keeping you from being found?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Bye.
So they're all in on, wow.
Yeah, these people are. Well, it's a very large extended family of mine. So
It was all family who was doing this.
yeah, but we are talking 30 people. 30.
Oh, wow.
It's a big chunk of the
Wow, it
congregation.
is. Yeah.
Yeah, and even like super close family friends. So, I mean, that didn't last too long. But my dad was afraid that somebody was going to come steal me out of my bed, as he had done. So my mom, she realized that she had to get separated and divorced at this point because she needed to get me back. So she sold off her life in Missouri and she went back to Seattle and she filed for separation and to start the divorce so she could try to get custody of me again. At this point, my dad wasn't so afraid anymore. So I got to come back to my house and it was empty. There was nothing in that house. It was really, really surreal. Sorry, this is so emotional. It's so emotionally taxing to talk about all of this.
Yes, it is. You don't have to apologize for anything. And you don't have to share anything you don't want to share either.
You know what? I feel like it's important because
sure. Well, yeah, it helps other people.
Going to help somebody else.
Sure.
And that's what I want. So their divorce began. My mom got a job working in an apartment complex, and she kind of got into that apartment management industry, and she got an apartment where she was working at. She had never had a job. Okay. I mean, maybe, in the 70s when she was 18, but she had never had a job. And she did very, very well. Around this time, so they decided they were going to fight over custody of me, right? Because witnesses have to do that. And also my parents at this point just hated each other. And I think it was kind of just a battle to the death, So my dad's company that he worked for, they went on strike. And he was paying for a lawyer. He was paying our house payment. He was paying my mom alimony. He was just, bleeding money. So he had to cross the picket line at his job, which meant some days he didn't get to come home because they would, try to break your windshield and everything. It just sucked for him. It was just the worst possible time for his company to go on strike. So sometimes my visits with him would be spent at my grandparents', and I would just talk to him on the phone because he would be too afraid to leave the factory that he worked at. So when the strike ended, the company went out of business, and he lost his job, and he had to sell our house to pay for his lawyer. So he had to, I mean, we had all kinds of cool stuff. We had an RV and we had a boat and trade. We had all this awesome stuff. It was all gone to pay my mom and dad's lawyers so they could fight each other. So my dad had to move back in with his mom and dad and go to work for my grandfather's janitorial company. Yeah, we are really good witnesses. We have our
own. It all comes back to cleaning. It always comes back to cleaning.
Yeah, we are classic witnesses.
Sure.
Yeah. So he was kind of living on my grandfather's, the floor in my grandfather's den and everything. And around this time, he started poisoning me hard against my mother. which was not hard to do because I adored my father. And like I said before, he's very charismatic and articulate and fun. And I was daddy's girl. And it didn't take him long to completely brainwash me that my mom was a horrible, evil person. My mom at this time was kind of experiencing freedom for the first time. She wasn't going to the meetings anymore. When she got back to Washington, she stopped going to the meetings. And, she made some friends that weren't witnesses and started dressing a little bit differently, not, covered from head to toe. And she was not living the life that she had always told me we were supposed to be living. So it was really easy for me to see her as the bad guy. She had started this divorce. She was not a witness anymore. My dad, I don't know if you've ever heard this term, emotional incest.
Oh, very much. Yeah.
Okay.
Or covert incest is another way. Yeah. I'm very familiar in my own family. Yes.
Yeah. So it wasn't a sexual at all.
No, it's not about sex.
Right. I want to make sure that's clear.
No.
But my dad did do that with me. And he kind of turned me into a surrogate spouse and turned me into like someone who had to validate his feelings and look out for his feelings. And all of my energy went into him, making sure he was okay, trying to anticipate his emotional needs. And very little was left over for me.
Yes.
And I was like 10, so it was just something I wasn't really emotionally mature enough to handle.
Yeah, it is a very, very unfair place to put your child in. It is not a child's responsibility to handle their parents' feelings.
Right. And with this divorce going on and everything, and my mom being the bad guy, I mean, I just made it as difficult for her as possible. At one point, she had told me that I didn't need to talk to the elders about anything if I didn't want to. And I tried not to. In the very beginning, when they would come over and try to talk to me about what was happening, I mean, I would just sit there and cry because I was just so confused about it. But it didn't take me long to realize that what my dad needed me to do was talk to the elders and give them all the dirt that I could on my mom, even if I had to make it up. So I did that. I would write letters for him to the courts about what a horribly abusive mother I had, which wasn't true. And when I would have my visits with her, I would make it as difficult for her as possible. I would run away. I ran away once at about, 11 o'clock at night. She called the cops. They came and picked me up and made me go back. I mean, we just screamed at each other all the time. And, my mom did not exactly handle herself very well either. I do try to give her a little latitude because she was kind of starting her life. The life she was living was the life I lived when I was 20, but she was 35. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Just had no experience in life. She'd been such a sheltered JW wife and mother. And she was escaping this abuse and being punished for it. And you better believe that everybody in our hall wrote a mean letter about her, about what a horrible, abusive mother she was, all of her former friends. So she was going through a lot. She didn't really share with me because it really wasn't my job, to handle that. That's the way she felt. My dad felt a different way.
Well, one is far more manipulative.
So manipulative.
Right.
Yeah. So, so their divorce kind of ended pretty quickly. They sold everything off, but the custody battle just went on and on and on and on and on. And when their lawyers realized that they had nothing left, we were getting ready to go to trial. The lawyers told me I was going to have to get ready because I was going to have to go to the judge and tell him who I wanted to live with. And I was ready. I was ready to do all that. And they were like, hey, you guys are out of money. You don't have anything left to sell. So you're going to need to settle. Yeah. So lawyers,
Funny
man.
how the tune changes when you run out of money.
Right. Yeah. So vampires, man. So they settled. My mom had to give up because I did not want to live with her. I did not want to be with her. All that mattered to me was being a witness. And my dad had made it extremely clear that my mom was not a witness, and she was making it pretty clear by her actions. She still believed, but she was not, she wasn't doing the stuff, So my dad ended up winning custody of me. I didn't want to be around my mom. And she realized that it was horrible when we were together. So she stopped making me come for my visits. And pretty soon I never went to go see her ever. And we never spoke. So maybe, I don't know, within months of their divorce and the custody battle and everything being finalized, my dad was introduced to a woman at the circuit assembly. Because it is very important that witnesses get paired off as quickly as possible, as you know.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So he was introduced to this woman, and she was, she was, those people who come across as impossibly happy.
Yes.
Those witnesses with the glassy eyes and the pasted on smile.
Yeah, it always makes me think of Tom Cruise jumping around on Oprah's couch or whatever, where he was just like so over the top insane. It's just, nobody's that happy. Come on. Like, you're making up for something else at that point. That's,
Yeah.
Not normal.
No. And that's the way she was. And I just saw right through it.
Mm-hmm.
And she just very much needed her face to be in my face, and I was very put off by her. At this point, I was not that happy-go-lucky kid anymore. At this point, I was my dad's therapist and his protector. And I had seen the ugly side of a lot of things. And I was very depressed. Very depressed. So this impossibly happy persona, it didn't sit right with me. It felt like something was wrong. Like she was hiding something. Oh, so fake.
Yeah.
So fake. Yeah, it was very fraudulent. And that's how I felt about her. But my dad needed to marry her immediately. The only problem was that he was not scripturally free to get remarried.
Oh.
Yeah. Now, he had told me that my mom was a whore, and because she now wears skirts that go above her knee, she's a total slut, and I'm sure she's sleeping around and blah, blah, blah. So he believed that she was doing all that, but he didn't have any proof of it. So
and can I interject here? Because not everyone who listens is a former Jehovah's Witness. So for those who don't understand their whole scriptural freedom part, so if two people get divorced and they're Jehovah's Witnesses, they can get divorced. It's certainly frowned upon, but they can get divorced. But you are not scripturally free to remarry until one of the partners has moved on sexually. And you have to, like, some people have to have letters written by their former spouse saying, like, yes, I have moved on sexually, or maybe they marry somebody else, so that can be presumed, right? But there has to be, if there's, it all hinges around sex. They're so sex focused, it's amazing. But it all hinges on that. And so your mom could have kept him from ever being able to remarry again without the fear of getting shunned. He would get shunned if he was to do so. He would be disfellowshipped. Well, should have been disfellowshipped for marrying when he's not scripturally free. But yeah, you can almost like hold somebody's life in your hands, their sexuality, for the rest of your life if you don't move on, and you want to make sure that oh boy over there doesn't get to ever get married again and move on. Now, I don't know how it worked for you guys, but it's just such an insane thing to try to explain to anyone who's never been one of Jehovah's Witnesses. You're like, well, you're divorced. Of course, you can go get married, go have a relationship, go do whatever you want. No, that's the legal system. We're talking about the Jehovah's Witness legal system now. And that trumps everything. And so, yeah, just because the legal system says that you're free to remarry does not mean that in Jehovah's Witnesses' eyes or in God's eyes, according to them, you are. Someone has to have moved on sexually.
Yeah.
So what happens with your dad? He's introduced to this person and he's not scripturally free.
Okay, so my dad goes out to lunch with my mom. He takes her out to lunch in order to get her to admit that she has had sex. That is what he wants, because he has got to get remarried immediately.
So crazy.
So what ended up happening was he got her to share something that had happened to her. She had been raped, and that it had been somebody that she knew, that a friend of hers from work. They had come to her house late at night. She let him in the house because or into her apartment, because she just kind of, this is the toll that being a Jehovah's Witness can take on you sometimes, is you don't really understand certain dangers when you get out.
Yeah.
So this had happened to her. And it's really hard for me to talk about.
Sure.
I just feel really bad that happened to her. So my dad did not care that she had been raped. He just wanted to know if she screamed. Because that's what constitutes rape when you're a Jehovah's Witness. You have to scream. If you don't scream, you weren't raped. So he didn't ask her if she was okay. He didn't ask her if she needed help. And she didn't know what to do, So he came home and he was all smiles. And he was happy to share with me, hey, I'm free. Your mom says she got raped, but she let him in the house, and so that's not rape. She wanted to do that, blah, blah, and he says she was in her pajamas, so of course he was going to come in and do that. And I was a little kid and I was like, yeah, sure. She must have wanted this, which I hate to say. It makes me feel so bad to say that.
Well, yeah. And, it also is like this thing. It's like she was in her pajamas, so she wanted it. Okay, Dad, would you rape? Would you just go for it? Would you rape any woman who was in her pajamas? Because if she's in her pajamas, clearly she would. Like the sick mentality that results in those kinds of horrible arguments, and the lack of care for another human being that is exhibited when it's like, yay, she got raped, I'm free to remarry.
I know.
Like, how callous do you have to be? It just shows again, I think the charisma in this case is hiding something. You have a person here who's not able to perspective take, to mirror other people in a healthy way, mentally and emotionally. It sounds like a lot of what would be called narcissism, which again is what Jehovah's Witnesses are. They're very narcissistic. And so I'm just very sorry that your mom in this situation got put in a place with a narcissist to lay out something so vulnerable and so painful in front of the entirely wrong audience. That
Yeah.
is not the person that you want to tell that to. It is not gonna, you're not gonna get anything but hurt even more.
Yeah. I don't know how he got her to tell him that.
I'm sure he
I'm
just
sure
badgered her and badgered her and badgered her until she
he manipulated the situation in some way.
Sure, that's yeah.
And you know what really upsets me is that now that I'm a mom, I see the danger in telling a little girl
Mhm.
that you can be raped and it's okay if you wear the wrong thing.
Oh yeah.
You know, because I
Horrible
internalized
messaging.
that. Yeah, when he told me that that's how things are, I was like, yeah, makes sense. Sure, dad said so, must be true, you know. And that's dangerous for a little girl. I mean, it's dangerous for anyone, but I mean, for a little girl who is going to grow up and in a few years possibly be in a situation like that. I mean, do you want her um to to blame herself if something like that happens to her? Like,
Sure, it's that's
it's
what
a
Jehovah's
bad
Witnesses
lesson.
do.
Yeah, yeah, it's a bad precedent to set.
Oh, it is. You're responsible for the actions of others.
Exactly. Um, so anyway, so we're yay, my dad can get remarried. So he went to the elders and the circuit overseer, and he said, she's had sex with someone else. I want to get remarried. And they're like, cool, go in peace. You know, we give you our blessing. So he went ahead and just married her within months. Right before the wedding. Now, I didn't tell my mom that any of this was happening because I wasn't speaking to her. I was shunning her. I was absolutely shunning my mother for not being a witness.
And was she
So
disfellowshipped or
no,
okay, all right,
no.
that's what I thought. All right.
Yeah. But as you know, you don't have to be disfellowshipped, you
Well,
know.
no, and you had your dad right there in your ear, right, pushing
Oh yeah.
this too. So yeah.
Yeah. So she found out somehow that my dad was getting remarried. And there were a couple of issues that she had. First of all, she was angry at him for taking that information that she had given him about what happened to her and using it to free himself scripturally, because he mischaracterized the situation. Second, she knew that once he was remarried and it got out that he was scripturally free, she was going to be disfellowshipped. It was just a matter of time. And once she was disfellowshipped, I would never speak to her again, which I was already not speaking to her. But it was really, really important that she not be disfellowshipped because I was such a believer and she was holding out hope that maybe one day we could be reunited. So she called an elder in the hall that her publisher card had been moved to, which was in the town that she was in now. And she kind of told them what was going on, and they put together an elders meeting for her. And the elders in that hall believed her. Kudos to them. I guess they were empathetic with her, and they were like, "Wow, this really sucks. This is really horrible.
It can happen." Yep.
Yeah, yeah. It's a really horrible thing to happen to you, and we're going to get to the bottom of it. So, but my dad and my stepmom were married. You know, they were married. Now, my stepmom, she lived in another town away from us, about 30 minutes away, and she had two kids of her own. One was my same age, and one was a few years older than me. And their dad had been cheating on her. He had divorced her. He had been disfellowshipped, and he had gone off and married the woman that he had been having an affair with. So she was free scripturally. But they had just lost their whole family too. I mean, the three of us, our entire lives had kind of been ripped apart. And they still had their house and everything. But my dad, you know, he wanted out of his dad's den. So we moved in with her pretty much right away. So at this point, I had lost my family, my mom and dad's, family unit. I had to leave my school and go to a new school. I lost at this point now my congregation, and we had to go to a different congregation.
And how old are you at this point?
11.
Oh, the ripe old age of 11. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. All right.
Yeah.
There's a lot to happen by 11.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and it was hard for my step siblings too.
Oh, for sure.
I wasn't super close to them at that time. We are very close now. All three of us are out of the religion now. But looking back on it, I mean, their dad had left their mom to go be with another woman and her kids, and then within months, here come me and my dad just moving in. We're total friggin' strangers to them, but here we are. My dad and my stepmom got married, honestly, within months. I mean, they did not know each other very well. So it was rough on us kids. It was really rough. It never should have happened that way. So the elders in this congregation now that, my stepmom's congregation that we were now in, they got wind of my dad not being scripturally free. So they started having a lot of elders meetings with my dad and my stepmom. And they told him, look, you guys are adulterers. That plain and simple. And for that, you should be disfellowshipped. And my dad's like, look, she told me that now he's saying that she wasn't raped. She's been having sex. She told me this and blah, blah, blah. And they're like, well, we need 2 witnesses to that. Right. This is how I learned about the two witness rule.
Ah, yes.
Yeah. So, it's surprising to me that so many ex-witnesses don't know that this is a thing, or didn't until the Australian Royal Commission came out, and it kind of got, drug out into the light. But I've known about it since I was little. You need 2 witnesses to any sin like that.
Someone to corroborate it.
Yeah. So my dad's like, all right, well, I'm going to get proof that she's sleeping around. So, he found out where she lived again. And he took me and my grandmother and his video camera, his camcorder, one of these, that you put up on your shoulder. And we went to her apartment. Her boyfriend, she had a boyfriend at the time. And we got a picture of his car in the driveway. And we sat outside of her apartment all night long with a camcorder recording the front door.
Mm-hmm. And as we know, if someone stays the night, then they must have moved on, right? Because that's how Jehovah's Witnesses see this. I cannot believe that he took you on this expedition.
Mm-hmm.
What the heck? I mean, other than to poison your mind against, but
I don't know why.
Bad boundaries. There's no boundaries here. My goodness.
Oh, we had no boundaries at all. I mean, even during their divorce, when I was little, I mean, he gave me the details of his sex life with my mom. Of
course he did.
The things that I know, the things that I knew when I was just not mentally or emotionally equipped to know them. I'm surprised that I'm a functioning member of society sometimes.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, because that is abusive, and it's its own form of trauma, and you shouldn't.
Yeah.
You don't need to know it as an adult, much less as a 10, 11-year-old kid.
Yeah. So when you say no boundaries, you really hit the nail right on the head. I mean, we had no boundaries at all. And, so he had the camcorder and he pointed it at my grandma. He says, okay, or he points it at the door. He's like, all right, there is her front door. There is his car. And here's my mother. And then he turned around and pointed at me. And there's my daughter. All right. There are 3 of us here. And so we sat there all night long like total weirdos, and videotaped her front door, and got him coming out the next day and getting in his truck and leaving. And we're like, woo, yeah, we win, you know. So my dad took that videotape and promptly put it in the hands of the elders. Now, what he didn't realize at the time was that on this videotape was a recording of a big party that my family had been involved in. My family in our other congregation that were running that congregation, you know, in our previous congregation.
So this was an old tape.
It was an old tape, yeah, you know, and he just put in a tape, you know, and just hit record. So my family are all terrible alcoholics, including my father. And I will get to this in a little bit, but he, at this point, alcohol has ruined his life. I mean, they are terrible alcoholics, and they love to party, and they were kind of in charge of the congregation. So it was kind of this little cult within a cult of we can do whatever we want. So it was a party of my entire family, probably 30 people, out at Cannon Beach, which is in Oregon. We had rented a bunch of condos, and all of us kids were there, and they were doing a lot of drinking and a lot of inappropriate stuff, and they were making fun of other people in the congregation pretty hardcore.
Oh boy.
Yeah, it wasn't a good look. I mean, you got the PO, you've got all the elders, all the ministerial servants, all the pioneer sisters. They're all hammered, and they're all swearing, and they're all, you know, poking fun and being super inappropriate. And all of us kids were there watching it. We were all just sitting around, you know. So anyway, the elders watched this part of me and my dad spying on my mom like crazy people. And then they just continued to watch the rest of the video. And all of the dirty laundry kind of came out. So they decided at that point that they really didn't like my dad very much. They decided that he was lying. They decided that he was lying, and promptly all of the elders in my old congregation got removed. And my grandfather was removed as the presiding overseer. And my dad and my stepmom were disfellowshipped for this. So, I mean, honestly, it was hard on my dad to be disfellowshipped. I still don't understand why my stepmom was disfellowshipped. I
gotta say, I'm a little confused by that too. Other than,
yeah,
I mean, because I don't know.
Well, what they said was my dad was like Achan, and my stepmom was like Achan's wife. That's what they said, and that my dad had done something bad, and she had known, and she tried to cover it up. And you know, this is just the tale I was told. I wasn't in that elders meeting, you know. So, and I know that my dad is a serial liar. So this is what I was told.
Well, and again, in the end, you know, are we looking for reason from an unreasonable, made up, ridiculous system? I mean, you know.
Right. Yeah.
You can be disfellowshipped for anything 3 people in a room decide you can be disfellowshipped for. So
yeah, exactly. So my dad and my stepmom were now disfellowshipped. And when I say that hit me like a bullet in my heart, I can't overstate enough the pain that caused me. I think at this point I was about 13 when they were disfellowshipped, and it just destroyed me. It just destroyed me because my dad was my hero. I was a cult of one, you know, kind of orbiting around him.
Yeah,
you know, he sucks all the room out of he sucks all the air out of every room he walks into. I mean, he is like a black hole. Okay.
Yeah,
like, once you get into
I know the type.
Yeah. And I think it hurt me worse than it hurt him. because I was so young and I didn't understand that, bad feelings don't last forever.
Well, yeah, you have no
So
tools. You're a kid, and here's the person you look up to, and that you've been involved with in an unhealthy way as far as the emotional abuse, and now he is being taken down by the very thing that he's also taught you to be super into,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like that kind of backfires in a way here, because now you're this super little, eager super dub kid probably who's
yeah,
super into this thing, and now your dad's this fellowship. So like, that's got to be crushing and confusing uh
yeah.
and how do you move on from that? That's got to change the vibe, the tenor of just the house in general too.
It was soul crushing. It was soul crushing. And it just cast a black cloud over our home. And I'm sorry, I guess I kind of glossed over. I was baptized.
Oh, when?
I got baptized when I was 11.
Oh, wow.
Right after my dad and my stepmom got married. I quickly got baptized. Because I got baptized, yeah, because I believed it and it's true. But I also kind of wanted to make a symbolic gesture towards my mother that this is what I'm going to do with my life. And if you want anything to do with me, you will come back. In fact, when I did my questions, you
Mhm.
know how they come in and they go over those questions with you.
Yep.
I didn't even understand them. Like I had studied them with my dad and he told me what the answers were and I just wrote them in the margin of the book and I didn't even understand. So the guys asking me the questions and I was just reading the answers and it made no sense to me, but
So if asked any follow-up questions, you would have floundered because you didn't really
uh,
understand the basis.
dude, I was still, watching cartoons and playing with Barbies.
Yeah, you're an
Okay.
11-year-old girl. I mean, you shouldn't be making lifelong dedications to cults or
Yeah.
anything at that
Right.
point. You're 11.
Yeah. It was all way over my head. Okay.
Yeah.
But it's true. So they were disfellowshipped for a pretty good amount of time. We would go to the Kingdom Hall because they wanted to be reinstated. And, we would go late and sit in the back. And my dad, my stepmom would tell me and my step siblings to stay inside and associate. And they would go sit in the car and wait for us.
Oh,
And
wow.
my step siblings were extremely social and they were just, I don't know, they were just different from me. By this point, I was not, like I said, I was not happy anymore. I was deeply and clinically depressed. And I was also 13 and going through puberty and all that. Just,
Sure, right.
everything sucks, right?
Yeah. Rough
Puberty
time to
hit me
have all this
hard.
thrown on top of it.
Yeah, yeah. So they would stay inside and chat and have a good time. But I would just go sit with my dad and my stepmom in the car because
So
my
you
feeling
all were
was,
not, can I ask, so you all were not treated differently? Because sometimes when the parents are disfellowshipped, the children end up getting shunned too. So in the Kingdom Hall, were you all treated any differently? Or was everybody just kind of like, well, yeah, they're getting left here to associate, let's hang out, let's see if we can encourage these kids?
I think they all kind of felt sorry for us.
Okay.
Yeah.
You never know how that's going to go.
It's hard for me to say because I kind of felt like if my dad wasn't good enough for these people to talk to, then I wasn't good enough. And so I didn't care if they wanted to talk to me or not. I kind of was like, I'm going to go be with my dad.
Hmm.
So, I mean, I guess maybe my step siblings would have more insight into that. They might feel differently. But it didn't really come up for me because I just didn't care. I felt like everyone was pretty much treating us the same. There was one of the elders at disfellowship, my dad would come over and study with my step siblings. And I would very, very dramatically like turn my back to him and walk away and slam a door, like, so, yeah, it didn't matter. I kind of felt like if he can't be in this, then I'm not going to be in it either. I just wanted to be, I wanted to be in solidarity with my father.
Understood.
Yeah. So, because of all of this, I did horribly in school. I, there was a part of me that kind of felt like it doesn't really matter because the end of the world's coming, so I didn't really care about my schoolwork. But also I was so distracted. And I feel like I had kind of had a big setback in, like I had told you, in grade school, because I had missed so much school. So I just failed out of everything. I did the absolute minimum that you could do to pass every single year. I was terribly depressed. I only wore black clothes, and I was that kid. And around this time, I started to get interested in boys
Mm-hmm.
and all that stuff. And when I was about 14 or 15, I fell in love hardcore with a witness boy. And yeah, that's never a good thing. And we made out, we did all this stuff. And, I wrote about it in my diary, which my dad was reading. Every time I walked out of the house, he dug through my room and found everything I ever wanted to hide. And, so that's when the ear beating started, when he started getting really, really nasty with me. When I started becoming a woman, and have my own ideas about things, or even just wanted to, like, I used to have those little girl bangs, and I called him daddy. And, when I got a little older, I'm like, I think I want to grow my bangs out, and I don't want to call you daddy anymore because it's kind of juvenile. And he spent hours screaming at me about those things. He had a really hard time letting go of me worshiping the ground he walked on. And when I got interested in boys and, started, doing the things that teenage kids do, which,
Sure.
we were witnesses. So it's not like we were getting too crazy, it was the end of the GD world. Okay. And every day when I would come home from school, I would just wait nervously, because when he got home from work, he was going to scream at me. And this went on a very long time. He would have me come in his office and sit in a chair, and he would hold a Bible and read to me about, how awful I was, and then scream at me about what whore I was, and, how unclean I was, for kissing a boy, like.
So you're starting to get a small taste of what your mom endured on some level,
Yeah.
as you're starting to become someone that is separate from him.
Yeah. Yeah. He never hauled off and hit me, but he would throw things to scare me. And it worked. I was terrified of him. Some days I would purposely miss the bus coming back from school, because it was like, oh, that's 30 more minutes or an hour that I can have not in my house. I was miserable. So around this time, I started to get kind of curious about my mother, because it had been years now since I had really seen her, spoken to her. And the internet was a thing now. So we started to talk, like, on instant message, AOL, and, you got mail, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And
Allow me to break in here for a second. This channel is made possible by you, the listener. If you appreciate what we're doing here, please consider supporting at patreon.com/shunned, or leave a review on iTunes or other platforms. Like and subscribe. All those things help the channel. If you're looking for merch, you can go get some Shun swag from the shunnedpodcast.com website, or reach out there to be on the show. If you're looking for more ex-Jehovah's Witness content, I'll recommend my first podcast called This JW Life. You can find that on podcast apps as well as YouTube. And if you're feeling stuck in life, struggling to find happiness and community, maybe you're haunted by the past, beating yourself up, unsure of who you are or what you even want out of life now that you've lost this one identity that was given to you by a cult, reach out through my other sites like exjwhelp.com, that's exjwhelp.com, or storyworkscoaching.com. And let's see about working together to help you find a life that fits you and who you are, maybe for the first time ever. And now, back to our guest.
I was a teenage girl. I really needed my mom. My stepmom, she tried, but she just wasn't going to cut it. I really you need your mother, to kind of help guide you through that. And I started having my visits with her again. And pretty soon I wanted to move in over there because it was a much less stressful environment. My dad screamed at me all the time, and I was afraid in my home. And it seemed like a reprieve from the terror and the violence and the disfellowshipping thing. And I just wanted to escape. I really, really wanted to escape.
Was your mom one of Jehovah's Witnesses at that time?
She was still indoctrinated. However, she wasn't going.
So
at
she
all.
kind of, so she would be homey, physically out, mentally in. She wasn't
Exactly.
really participating, but she was still right there as though she was one of Jehovah's Witnesses.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
And she knew what my dad was like. And when I told her I want to come live with you, she said, I'm going to make it happen. And she got another lawyer, and my dad got another lawyer, and we went rounds again. But, by this time I was 16. So it didn't really matter what my dad said. The court was like, she's old enough to make this decision. So I got to go live with my mom. Which it was nice for a while. My mom, she was really happy to have me back and everything. But I started homeschooling at that point, doing American school, because I had moved out of my school district. And my mom worked very hard, very long hours, long days. Sometimes she would be gone for 12 or 13 hours a day. And that meant I was sitting alone in that apartment by myself with nothing to do. And I kind of just found a bad group of people in the apartment complex that we lived in. We lived in kind of a rough area. My mom did. So I kind of got, I really don't know what I was thinking. I think I was just kind of starved for experience of any kind. Plus I was a teenager, so I'm like,
Sure.
oh, I'm never going to die. And, nothing can hurt me. I'm invincible. So I somehow kind of fell into a group of people that were way too old for me. They were in their early 20s, and they were all doing a lot of drugs, a lot. And I was still a witness. I still believed, but to me, this was just so exciting, and I can't really explain it. I just wanted to be one of the gang for once in my life. I wanted to have cool friends for once in my life, and I had the freedom, and my mom was so naive that she just let me, and she wanted me to have fun and have freedom. So she let me go pretty much anywhere I wanted to go and do what I wanted to do. And I got really, really involved in the rave scene of the early 2000s. I don't know if you're familiar with that at all.
I know what they were. I was one of Jehovah's Witnesses.
You were.
I wasn't participating, but I know what that could have been like. Yes.
Yeah. So I, and this is really hard to talk about, and it's embarrassing. But I got really involved in some terrible, terrible drugs. And
sure, you were
I
just
started
a hurt
smoking.
kid looking for escape, coming from abuse, and you found things. I mean, that's gonna happen.
Yeah. So that was traumatic in and of itself. But I got really into, and I know this is going to sound crazy, but I got really into meth.
Sure.
And I started using that a lot. And my mom gave me money, she thought I was doing wholesome things, going out with my girlfriends or whatever, but I wasn't. I was spending it on drugs. And I was stealing from my mom to pay for it.
People do when they get hooked.
I was just a baby.
Sure.
I was 16.
Again, exposed to something that is much bigger than you. Like whether it was your dad's emotional issues or whatever the case may have been, your whole life you're being exposed to things that are bigger than you. You're just a little kid. You shouldn't have to be dealing with any of these things.
Yeah.
It's too big, so you don't know how to handle it.
Oh, yeah. So I was so involved in this, and I knew that it was wrong, but I was really pushing that aside because I was just so intrigued with this new life. And before I knew it, I kind of felt like I needed to do this. And I had started smoking and, just generally being a delinquent, and I had quit going to school. I should have been a sophomore at this point, but I was a high school dropout. So I was on a great path. So around this time, 9/11 happened. And that was a big wake-up call for me because I thought it was Armageddon.
Of course,
I really did.
Like so many did.
Yeah. I remember because I wasn't in school. I just sat on the couch and watched it happen for days. Because you remember, they just kept playing it over and over.
Oh, yeah, I remember.
Yeah. It was horrifying. I mean, it really, really hit me hard. And I was like, oh my God, this is a wake-up call from Jehovah. I gotta stop this. I gotta get back to the Kingdom Hall. So I told my mom I was going back to live with my dad, and he was more than happy to take me back. So the custody issue started again. They both got lawyers.
Oh, so I didn't ask you something that I wanted to, and that was when you moved from your dad's that first time to your mom's.
Uh-huh.
How did he react? Because I would imagine that someone that screamy might not react super well to you saying, I want to leave and go live with mom now.
Let's just say I had to trudge through a mile of crap with him to get there. He screamed and screamed and screamed and screamed. Every opportunity he got, he yelled at me.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh no, he did not react well. No.
Okay, I'm just surprised. I mean, this is a guy who has literally stalked you in another state and taken you before. So I guess I was kind of surprised that there wasn't, or wondering if there wasn't another huge and kind of.
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they got lawyers.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I'm surprised he didn't try to force it, in some way.
I think at this point I was old enough, and also he was just really sick of me because I was a teenage girl, so he was, and my step siblings were also teenagers. So they had 3 teenagers in the house. So there might've been a part of him and my stepmom that were like, good God, just one less,
Oh, that's true. You did have your stepmom there too. So that might've helped in some way.
Yeah. Yeah. She didn't want me to go because she didn't want to have to pay child support. But so that's why they fought over custody of me. I don't know that they really wanted me there anymore because I was a pain in their ass. And her kids were pain in the ass, that is your whole job when you're a teenager, is to be a pain in the ass. So we were doing it quite well.
Okay. And so now you're wanting to go, you're saying, hey, this is the big A. I'm terrified of this whole 9/11 thing.
Yeah.
Let's go back to dad's place.
Yeah. Yeah. So they fought over custody of me again. And they had their last hearing for custody 1 week before I turned 18. And the judge looked at the paperwork, looked at my parents and said, you guys are ridiculous, and kicked them out of the court. Like, So I went back to my dad, but at this point I was now so far behind in high school that I wasn't going to be able to go back. I had a drug addiction that I wasn't really sharing. Also, I had this terrible eating disorder that I had kind of started when I was about 14. I had started binging and purging. And it wasn't really about weight loss to me. It was about taking control.
That's what it is for it's control. That's what eating
Yeah.
disorders are, self-harm. It's
Yeah.
about, here's one thing in my life that I can control and nobody else can. You know, we can see from the outside that it's out of control, but in the moments, as that person that feels like I can at least control what goes in or out of my mouth, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's something. It speaks to the desperation and the feeling of out of control nature of being raised in the environment you were in and susceptible to at that time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I would say that was my first experience with addiction was purging. And you know what, that I can tell you confidently that I have been addicted to many things.
Can we say that your first addiction was probably Jehovah's Witnesses and or your father?
Yes. Yeah.
Because the cult is an addiction in and of itself.
Totally. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Very well said. Yeah. And you know, then the chemical dependencies that I picked up when I was a teenager.
Sure.
I have gone rounds with a lot of that throughout my life, but the hardest one to kick was purging, of all things. So and you know, my dad had known that I was purging. He had always known. In fact, he used to tell me to go clean the toilet. You know, like he didn't really care that I was doing it. He just didn't want other people to know. You know, like, you made a disgusting mess, go clean the toilet. He didn't, if my child was purging, everything would come to a dead halt until we got that under control. But it didn't really matter. So, I went to the elders. I had been privately reproved long before for making out with a boy, you know. But this time I had to go to the elders and confess all of the horrible things I had done while I had been at my mom's, which I did. And this time I was publicly reproved.
Okay.
So I thought I kind of got off easy there. But
not just fellowship. They just let everybody know that you were not good association. Right.
But everybody kind of felt sorry for me because everyone knew that, and by this point, my dad and my stepmom were reinstated. So everybody just was kind of like, all right, well, she's back, and you know, we can kind of end that chapter there. But it was, and my dad helped me get my GED, and asked me what I wanted to do, if there was anything I wanted to do. And I told him I wanted to be a hairdresser. So he helped me get into beauty school. So I did very well in school. I really, really enjoyed it. But my addictions were really hanging on. And I was going out of my way to get money to get my hands on drugs. I mean, that drug could have ruined my life.
Come on, meth?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I came this close. Yeah.
I knew a lady I met on a forum for ADHD. A lot of people with ADHD have addiction issues.
Okay.
But anyway, I just met this lady on this forum for ADHD, and she was talking about meth, and she talked about how she got sick and threw up and then went after the vomit to get her fix back, so to speak. So we're talking about a drug that will can make you do anything for it once it starts to hijack your system like that. I mean, just anything.
Yeah.
There are many people who never make it off out of that world, and so it's people don't realize how tough that is.
It is horrifying. And it feels like it starts out so innocently and you
Sure.
don't even realize. You
Well,
don't
and
even
we
realize.
also have to say your dad had alcohol issues, right?
Oh my God, did he ever? A
Right.
case
So, I
of
mean,
beer.
there's some addiction issues potentially, there as
Yeah.
well. So,
Yeah. And by this time, when I had come back from my mom's and my dad had seen, that I had kind of lived this very worldly life and everything,
yeah.
he just started drinking beers with me. He kind of made me his drinking buddy. So at night he would give me a couple of beers and he would have a couple of beers. And, I was 17, 18, it's just, but he felt like, it was nice to have a drinking buddy, and that's all that really mattered.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. So,
So you were
I,
talking about how you had been back, you were doing the hairdressing thing,
yeah.
and the drugs were
Mhm.
still really dominant.
Yeah. So I continued to do these things I wasn't really supposed to be doing. And of course I got caught, because every time I've ever done anything wrong, I got caught. And my dad told me, and I had a worldly boyfriend, and just I was doing everything wrong that you could possibly do. So my dad told me one day that he was going to make me go back before the elders and confess again. And I had just turned 18, and we were both drunk because we had been drinking together all day. And I said, no, I'm 18 now and I'm done with elders meetings. I don't have to go anymore. Because something I kind of glossed over was when I was privately reproved when I was 14 for, being a normal kid. I had to do all those questions that they ask you, about sex. And I mean,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, yeah. So it's just really inappropriate questions that three grown men should never ask a 14-year-old child.
So you mean the
And
sexually abusive questions that are asked of adults of children when they put them in that position?
yeah,
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 because it's sexual abuse. They shouldn't be allowed to
I
do that.
agree. Yeah, I agree. And I knew that something was wrong. I felt traumatized by that situation,
Yeah.
but I didn't know why, because they're the elders and they never do anything wrong. So that memory had just kind of held on and stuck with me, and made me feel very dirty and very disgusting. And now that I was 18, I felt like I just didn't want to put myself in that position again. Plus, I was drunk and I had that liquid courage. So I was like, no, I don't have to do that, which was the wrong answer. So we went round and round about that. This all culminated in a suicide attempt for me, an extremely serious one. Um, on top of that, me and my boyfriend had broken up, and I was just a drama queen about that. And so between being drunk, the drug addiction, my dad telling me I needed to go do this really, really traumatic thing again. I just couldn't take it anymore.
All
And
the trauma of the past, everything
everything.
else that had happened. I mean, I don't think you're being a drama queen. I think you were just very, very hurt.
Yeah, yeah, it was terrible. So I overdosed, and
Sure.
I my dad and my stepmom knew what I was doing, and they didn't try to stop me. And maybe they
You
thought I was
mean they
just,
knew that you were overdosing?
yeah, yeah, they
Okay.
knew. They didn't try to stop me. Maybe they thought I was looking for attention, or I'm not sure, but I was dead serious. And I really think I almost died that night. I passed out on the bathroom floor in convulsions. Um, and when I woke up, I felt like I was half dead. And
Oh, yeah.
I was just surrounded in filth. And it was, horrifying. After that, they took me to a therapist for a little while. But the therapist was kind of deconstructing my religion a little bit with me. Yeah.
So the therapist saw a problem.
She did. Yeah. So they took me out of there.
Of course they did.
Yeah. So at this point, I was 18 and me and my dad were fighting so much that he kicked me out of the house, which I was happy to go. So I moved in with a friend of mine, a guy that I had met when I was hanging out with that group of people that were really into drugs, and I was continuing to use drugs. And I graduated from beauty school and did really, really well there. And this man, who was a man, he was 31 and I was 18, sort of got me into a relationship with him. And I didn't think it was weird at the time, but now that I'm 37, almost 38 years old, I think that's really, really creepy.
Sure, not surprising.
Yeah. Yeah. That's who's there to catch wayward children, are predators.
Yeah.
He was a nice guy. He was nice to me. He never hurt me. But I was very, very vulnerable, and he was a grown man. So we started this relationship. And my dad told me that if I was going to be in a sexual relationship with him, I had better marry him or he wasn't going to talk to me anymore. And I was like, okay. So we got married. I married this guy. Oh, Michael, that's such a bad idea. He did help me get off of drugs, which is probably the best thing he did for me.
That's good.
He did. Yeah. He kind of told me that, it was going to be him or the drugs, so I could be here with him in our home. And he took care of me financially. He was my new dad, basically. He's like, you can be here with me, or you can go out and live in the street and do drugs. So he did help me get off of drugs. But I just kind of transitioned from hard drugs to alcohol. Mm-hmm. I just kind of replaced one for the other. So I was drinking very, very heavily. And my dad came over a few times and tried to convert him. Which was hilarious.
Of course he did.
Yeah. Yeah. My ex-husband was he was a really smart guy, and he was very skeptical and sort of an agnostic, and he was way smarter than my dad. Okay. So my dad brought over that Blue Creation book. Remember that one? Oh
yeah, Life, How Did It Get Here, by evolution or by creation?
Yeah, it's like the stupidest book ever written. And he left that with him and tried to, convert him with that book, but it was never going to happen. I tried very hard to convert him. I took him to a district convention in 2005. That was the last thing I ever went to. The last witness thing I ever went to was in 2005. We went for one day. We listened to, those experiences where a bunch of people stand up on the stage and give their experience to the elder.
Yeah, been there, done that. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of them was about showing proper headship, or being respectful of the headship arrangement. Mm-hmm. So they had this elder's wife, and she was just a very gregarious person. You could just tell by her personality. She's very outgoing and bubbly. And she said that her personality is just naturally outgoing, and her husband is a little bit more conservative, a little bit more introverted. But she learned that she had to withhold her personality and allow her husband to take the lead and, take charge. And that's what my husband listened to. And he was like, good God. The next talk was started out with them saying how bad Harry Potter was, that it was the devil. And so that didn't go well. That went over like a lead balloon with my husband at the time. He was like, we got to get out of here. But I felt very much like I needed to attempt to get back in. Now that I was married, I was off drugs. I felt like it was really important that I get back in. So I went to Kingdom Hall in my local area, and I went inside and I just asked if somebody would come to my house and study with me. And this pioneer sister started showing up. And she was probably one of the kindest people I've ever known in my life. Just amazing. And she genuinely cared about me. I have nothing but glowing things to say about this woman. So she started coming, and I at one point told her, I would really like to understand the 1914 doctrine. Can we maybe at our next study, can we go over that? She's like, yeah, absolutely. It's going to be exciting. Right. So the next week she comes over and she's like, are you ready? And I'm like, yeah, let's do it. It was so exciting. She's like, okay, we'll turn to this scripture. I'm like, okay. So I read that scripture. Now turn to this scripture. Okay. And we just went down this whole string of scriptures and read them. And at the end, she goes, isn't that amazing? And it occurred to me that was it, Michael. That was our those scriptures read in that order, for whatever reason, was the entire reason that we believed that 1914 had any significance. And I knew in that moment that did not make sense. But I was convinced that it was a failing on my part.
Oh, of course it is. You just don't understand right now. It's your fault. It's not the fault of the organization, or it can't be that the doctrine is just absolutely batshit crazy.
Right.
I mean, it has to be you.
Yeah. So I just went along with it, and I'm like, yeah, wow, that's so super cool. And in my head was like, oh man, I am way less spiritual than I thought. I got to pray more so I can understand this crazy doctrine. So to kind of fast forward a little bit, my study sort of ended because me and my husband's marriage just fell apart. He was not exactly faithful to me, and he was just not exactly the best person in the world. So no hard feelings against him or anything, but our marriage did end. So I was kind of on my own for the first time. I wasn't really making any money doing hair because I was just really not very good at it. So I kind of moved into the industry of apartment management, which is what my mom had done. And it had always supported her quite well. And I was like, well, let me try my hand at this. And so I got into that. And I was just rocking and rolling at that. I was really, really good at it. And I was so proud of myself for finally, I had my own apartment. I had my own car. And I, for the first time, was standing on my own 2 feet. And I was like, 21. And I was off of drugs. My drinking was way cut back. I still smoked a pack a day, but still, I felt like, man, I am just really kicking ass. I was really proud of myself. I never had any money for food. I was bone thin, but I was paying the bills and I was making my own money. And my dad, after my divorce, he just kind of started shunning me and stopped talking to me. And one day I was just kind of feeling like, this is ridiculous. I think my dad should be proud of me. I want my dad to be proud of me. My mom is proud of me. I want my dad to just look at what I've accomplished, look where I've come from, and just say, I'm proud of you. That's all I wanted to hear from him. So I wrote him an email and just was like, I'm really sad that we don't talk anymore and we don't have a relationship anymore. I really, really wish that we could be close. I'm really happy. I feel like I'm doing really good. And, I've just overcome all this stuff. And he wrote me an email back. And this was the moment when I was at work because I didn't have internet access at my house. So I was at my job, and I opened up this email and read it. And it was practically copy pasted from a Watchtower. It was, well, honey, you're not a witness. You're celebrating holidays and birthdays. And my mom at this point had kind of started doing holidays, and I had been doing it with her. Naughty, naughty.
Oh, yeah. Worst thing you could possibly do.
Right.
So dumb.
So I already felt a little guilty about that. But he's like, even if you had kids, I wouldn't want to be around them because you would have them celebrating Christmas. And it just sounded like a Watchtower. You know how Watchtowers have that very distinct way of speaking?
Oh yeah, it's kind of sing-songy in a way.
Yes.
There's definitely a cadence to it.
Yeah. And that's how it felt.
Mhm.
And in that moment, I mean, he even referred to himself as a normal, loving father. He says, as a normal, loving father, I am very pleased that you're doing so well.
Oh my God, I'm over here right now bursting because I'm like, you're the guy who yells at people and hits people and all this stuff, but you're not proud of her who's actually like letting go of some of her vices, getting
Yeah.
clean, starting to live her own life, and that's the person you can't be proud of. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So as I read this email and I saw Watchtower, it said Watchtower all over it. And I felt like I wasn't speaking to my dad. I was speaking to a Watchtower. And that was the moment. That was the moment that all the lights came on in my head. It was like, it felt like my entire life I had been feeling around in a dark room for the answer to what was wrong with my family, what was wrong with my life. And I just wasn't able to see it. And when I read that email and I realized that my dad was a Watchtower and he wasn't even himself, that's when all the lights came on. And I was like, oh my God, it's the religion. That's the problem. It was like getting hit by lightning. And it was probably the single most traumatic moment of my entire life, but also the most defining moment of my life.
Wow, it's really interesting. I know I interviewed a Scientologist before, and
Yeah.
with Scientology, if I remember correctly, if you have your mother and father and you go into the Sea Org, basically you're separated from your mom and dad. They kind of see children. I don't think children belong to an individual mother or father. Children belong to that organization, and they kind of the Sea Org parents your child. Scientology parents your child. But really, were we any different? I mean, weren't our moms and dads just parenting us with Watchtower and the Bible story book and the Bible teach book and the blah, blah, blah? Like, wasn't it? That's what was parenting us. Our parents they were teaching us exactly what they were told to teach us from the cult that they were involved in. We were raised by Watchtower. It wasn't really our parents. Our parents didn't have their own identity. Certainly, like your dad clearly had his own problems that he brought to the fore and his own good qualities as well. But Watchtower just kind of takes anything that is negative and makes it worse and gives a framework and a narrative to attach all of it to a justification for all of the bad behavior. And so, it's just, we were all raised by Watchtower in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's sad. It's just really weird too when you think about it. It's very strange.
Well, and how would you like to have a child? I mean, and you're responsible for this child, but have no real say.
Yeah.
I
got to do whatever the magazines say, or got to do whatever the elders said, or the part on the meeting said to do this or that. So that's what we got to do.
Yeah. Whether you think it's right or wrong.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, in that moment, so much stuff happened. It was like the Big Bang. It could be measured in Planck time. Okay. It was like a lot of things happened quickly in succession.
I bet.
And my next thought was, and it's just vivid in my memory, like it just happened yesterday. My next thought was the district conventions with the apostate protesters outside with the signs.
Mhm.
I don't know if you guys had that where you lived, but in Seattle, we would go to the Tacoma Dome for our big district conventions, and there were, probably 50 people standing outside with signs.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I don't think we've really ever
You
had.
didn't have that?
No, like occasionally you would have somebody who had maybe a megaphone or something who would say
Megaphone.
some things, but
Hmm.
yeah, and they always did a good job. Good job. I don't know. They always did a job of pushing those people away or keeping them away in some way,
Yeah.
shape, or form. So I don't ever really remember myself having to go in. I vaguely remember one time some people with some signs, but it was like right at the sidewalk. So if you just walked down the sidewalk, you couldn't really read their signs anyway. You were too close, right? You had to be
Right.
over here somewhere. So I don't remember that, but it sounds like you remembered those individuals and they stuck out to you.
Oh, yeah. They were a big deal. I mean, to us, that proved that we had the truth because
Right.
we had people outside opposing us, just like Jesus said.
But now thinking back from your new perspective.
I was like, what do these people know? What do they know that I don't know?
I absolutely love that. That just validates people who go and do that kind of thing because you
Yeah.
never know who later is going to be like, well, wait a minute. I've seen these people before. They're doing all this. There must be some reason. Is there something they know that I should know?
Yeah.
Mm.
I don't want to like encourage people to storm kingdom halls or whatever.
For
I
sure.
don't
You're
know.
talking about people standing outside with some.
But yeah, people doing stuff like that. I mean, it took, a decade and a lot of things needed to happen in my life. But when all of the ingredients came together and everything just blew up, that was my first thought was those people. I remember their signs. I remember what they said because they had the same signs every year.
What they say?
The one I remember the most was a big sign that a guy had that had all the dates that they said the end of the world was going to come with a line through them. Right. So like whatever the first one was in the 1800s or going up to 1975. And there was a guy that would stand outside and say, yeah, go ahead and park your brains at the front door. They'll give them back to you when they're done.
Okay.
But I was terrified of them.
Well, of course you were, of course.
Oh, yeah. So I was alone at work that day, which was great because I was in the middle of a complete nervous breakdown. So I closed my office and I turned the sign and locked the door and I got in my car and I drove away. And I went to a grocery store and just sat in the parking lot and I sat in my car and I sobbed uncontrollably. And I had a boyfriend at the time who had never been a witness, and but he knew that I was, and I called him sobbing, and I said, "The Jehovah's Witnesses are a cult," and he said, "I know." He said, "I know that. Everybody knows that except for you." That's exactly what he said.
Yeah, that's tough. It's somewhat validating when you realize that everybody else knows, but also it just makes you feel so duped. Like, why was I the last person to know?
I know.
Yeah.
I know. So I because I didn't have the internet, only at work did I have the internet. So I had to go to a library. I didn't go back to work that day. I went straight to the library and started looking for books. And they had maybe 3 or 4 books about Watchtower history and stuff that weren't Watchtower books. I like the Presidents of the Watchtower and 40 Years a Slave, or all those older books. And then the books that they didn't have, I ordered and I went and picked them up the next day. So I had just a mountain of books on this subject, and I devoured them. I I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that I had been lied to. And you know what? The biggest problem for me was all of the bullshit I had been through, with the disfellowshipping and the getting grabbed off the street and the elders and all the elders meetings and what they had done to me in that elders meeting where they had asked me all of those really inappropriate questions, just messed up my brain. It was all for nothing. None of it meant anything. It wasn't working towards anything. It wasn't saving me in any way. It was all just extra nonsense on top of a life is already hard enough. And it was just extra drama and trauma for no reason,
Very empty.
Empty. Yeah. So I kind of see leaving the witnesses as kind of a state. It goes in stages. I think I was that to you earlier. And I started out in my I got to tell everybody stage, right? I got to save people. The first person I thought I would save was my stepsister. And I told her what I thought, and she didn't speak to me again for years until she woke up. She was like, "Oh yeah, you're an apostate now." My next stage was extreme anger. So I got on MySpace. Yeah. MySpace. Yeah. 2007, man. It was the year of MySpace. And I started to blog about my experiences. And, social media was still pretty new concept. And I didn't understand that people might spy on you, right? That had just never occurred to me that this might cause problems. I had found some ex-witnesses in my area, and we were talking, and I was just blogging about what I felt and what I thought. And, a friend of my grandmother's found that. And she showed it to my grandmother. And my grandmother proceeded to out me to my entire family. And that is when the hard shunning started with pretty much everyone. My dad would kind of orbit around my life a little bit here and there. But my grandmother didn't speak to me again for 11 years.
Wow.
Yeah, 11 or 12 years. I reached out to her many times. I would write her letters, just letting her know how I'm doing. And I would call her and leave messages on her answering machine. I was very close to her, my dad's mom. And she never responded. My dad would kind of talk to me here and there, but it was really surface level. It wasn't deep. It was mostly about things that we have in common, TV shows we both like. We both really like Star Trek. We're big Trekkies, him and me. Mm-hmm. So that's all he ever really wanted to talk to me about. I just kind of had to do this alone.
Mom, where was she at that point? Was she still in, or?
This is really interesting. Because I ordered Crisis of Conscience off of Amazon.
Oh yeah.
And I read that, and that, of course, I think that's the silver bullet right there, to this religion. And I gave her that book, and I said, "You need to read this." And she trusted me, and she had been out long enough that, you have to go to the Kingdom Hall all the time to be reindoctrinated every week, So, it had been a long time for her. So she went ahead and read it, and she woke up. So we woke up together.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I had my mom, but at this point we kind of lived a few hours away from each other. I didn't have internet access. So I just kind of went through this by myself. It's much different now, I think, with like Reddit and,
there's
Facebook.
Lots of support today. Yeah.
Tons of support. People like you, that are doing what you do. And so I just kind of had to go through it alone. And it was lonely and it was scary. And I was very depressed a lot. but it was the most worthwhile thing I've ever done.
Oh, absolutely.
Right down from having my child, of course. For myself, that's the most worthwhile thing I ever did was deal with that and sit in it and sit in the hardship. Yeah, it was life changing for me. So that's how I woke up.
That's really that's really I'm glad that you did wake up. Waking up is painful though. It's not fun to see that everything that you've ever believed in was as empty as like what you were saying earlier. It's just it's a tough thing. It's traumatic in and of itself to lose, because you're losing a belief system, you're losing an identity, you're losing family, you're losing friends, the places that you went, the things that you did. There's just so much all wrapped up in this one thing that you're really losing when you start to wake up to the realities of all of this, and that in the end you did all of this and you sacrificed for nothing.
Yeah.
And
how much easier things could have been.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Makes you wonder about who mom and dad could have been without the indoctrination. Again, I think that for a lot of us, our parents were fairly unhealthy because of where they came from, which is, in other words, many of them had generational trauma prior to entering this cult that just exponentially increases that trauma. So they still had their own things to work out, but certainly it would have been different and probably not necessarily as serious as it ended up being because of the involvement with the witnesses.
Absolutely. That's definitely where my family came from. I mean, I told you my dad's family, there was a lot of abuse and just that's a whole story in and of itself, out with everything that happened with his mom and dad. And, they were ripe for the plucking, for someone coming around selling hope.
Yes, selling hope. That's it, right? To vulnerable people who are hurt. And unfortunately, it's not the right type of help.
Yeah.
It really just makes everything worse. It's denial of the problems that are, and then let's add some new ones.
Right.
Yeah. It's about the worst thing you can do, really, as far as trying to get help. It just exacerbates everything. So this is how you woke up. Did you end up, so you got outed, did you end up getting disfellowshipped or anything because of?
I am not disfellowshipped.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I know, right? Like, I know that the elders were a little bit afraid of my mom, because she had threatened to be a little litigious with them if they came anywhere near me. According to them, they said they were afraid that my mom would sue if they bothered me anymore. So they left me alone. And it had been so long, since I had been in, that I think nobody really cared what I did anymore. My life since then has been a steady rise. And I just want to make sure that I stress this for people who may be in that beginning stage where I was, where you're so alone and you're so angry. That, I mean, it might get worse before it gets better, but
sure,
there is a path, and you will find it. You will find it. Because you're not going to have a choice. Okay.
You're going to find it if you keep looking.
Yeah. My mom has, since then, she's remarried. She moved back to Missouri, back to
mom.
Yeah. So she's back home. About 12 years ago, I found a job opening at an airline, and I applied, and I was hired as a flight attendant, which changed my life dramatically. I met my husband through that job, who is I don't really believe in soulmates, but if there is such a thing as a soulmate, that is him. He is the most amazing man I've ever met. And it took me until my 30s to find him. And we have a precious baby boy who will never know the hardship that I knew. And I feel for the first time like I'm truly happy,
That's awesome.
Yeah. And that's something I want people to know, that you can be happy again.
For sure. Or for the first time.
Or for the first time.
Because it's genuine and it's not wrapped up in other things that aren't real.
So true. Yeah. My dad, his life has been a steady spiral down into oblivion. He continued to drink heavily. He drinks now. When he wakes up in the morning, he has a beer and he drinks all day long. He was an elder for years while he was an alcoholic. Him and my stepmom moved to the state of Wisconsin for his work. He was recently, I want to say maybe 6 months ago, he was fired from his job for drinking on the job. He spent 5 years in an affair with a woman in his congregation, while he continued to serve as an elder. My stepmom knew about it and she didn't turn him in or anything. The tangled webs that they weave. I mean,
people have no idea. The average Jehovah's Witness has no clue what is going on in their own congregation.
Seriously. Within the past couple of months, he was caught having another affair online with an old girlfriend from when he was a teenager. He had naked pictures of her in his phone, and he's lost his job now from being an alcoholic. A couple of years ago, he died twice. He had 2 heart attacks. He was on life support for 10 days. I went out to Wisconsin because I thought he was dying, and that's the first time I had seen him in, I don't even remember how long it had been. It was him on life support with a tube down his throat, and it was awful. I had to be around my witness family and all these people who had been shunning me for years and years. The HLC was there.
Yeah, not
they
fun.
were looking down their nose at me as the apostate daughter. So his life has been a mess. His drinking is out of control. It's out of control. My stepmom has finally decided that she is done dealing with it, and she filed for divorce a couple of days ago. I am in contact with her again. She and I are back in contact. Because when I had the baby, my son is almost 10 months old, so I just had him. When I had the baby, I kind of wanted to see if my dad wanted to reconnect with this little guy. He changed my life. I want my dad to, also have his life changed. So me and my stepmom are in contact. My dad does not care about this kid at all. And a couple of days ago, he was removed as an elder and disfellowshipped for the 3rd time.
Oh, wow. This just happened. Wow.
Yeah.
Good for your stepmom for saving herself.
Totally.
At whatever level. I mean, this is obviously complex. I'm not going to get into her story, but
right.
Just happy for her that it sounds like she's doing something that is a measure of self-care for herself, which is something that, again, we're not taught to do as Jehovah's Witnesses, to take care of ourselves. We're taught to be self-sacrificing and long-suffering and awful terms like that, but we're never taught to actually love ourselves well. And certainly stepping away from this relationship sounds like it's probably loving herself well.
I'm really proud of her, especially in the situation with
Oh.
with a elder wife. You know, I mean,
Oh yeah.
she has been hiding this for him, his alcoholism, his infidelities, for 26 years. And she is finally saying no more. So I'm really proud of her. She's very much indoctrinated still,
Sure.
but she, I think, has the potential to wake up. So I'm just going to be there for her as much as I can. My dad is a drunk mess. I don't think he's going to live much longer. I mean, he literally, a case of beer, you know, like those big cheap, you know, like Milwaukee's Best Ice, you know,
Oh,
and
yeah.
he goes through a whole one a day, and he drives around and he spends all day at the bar. And
Just think
so
about how
that's where
much
his life is
liquid
left.
that is to drink, period. If it was water, how much it is. That's a lot of water.
Right.
You know,
Right.
this isn't water.
Right.
Yeah, it's really sad. I'm sorry that he's on such a self-destructive path and doesn't and just is that unhealthy. I mean, I think it's a reflection of a lot of things in his life, but
It really is. And it's, you know, I have struggled with addiction a lot in my life, as I've already told you. When I met my husband, but before we were married, I mean, I drank a lot. I drank every day. I was definitely an alcoholic. And he is such a different person. He's not a big drinker. He's a very, he comes from a really steady family. You know, he didn't have all this trauma in his background and everything. And I just wanted to be more like him. And I wanted to be worthy of someone like that, you know, because everyone I had ever dated before had been into some kind of drug or vice or pills or something, you know. And so I checked myself in to a rehab facility when we
good for
first started.
you.
And I did 30 days in there. And I dealt with my issues with purging while I was there. I dealt with my alcoholism. And now I have 5 years sober.
Congratulations. That's
Thank
awesome.
you. So I mean, I understand how hard it is, and I've been holding out my hand to my dad a little bit here and there, like, I'm here to help you when you're ready to get help. But this is all someone else's fault to him. You know, it's my fault.
Well, you can't
His heart
save
attack was
anybody
my fault.
I mean, Jehovah's Witnesses go knock on doors all the time trying to save people who didn't ask for their help.
Right.
And it's the same thing.
Right.
You can't save somebody who's not asking for help.
You're so right. Yeah. Yeah.
You can't rescue other people if they're not raising their hand and asking to be rescued.
Yeah.
They need to want it for themselves, and they need to be ready. And I mean, it's just like any addiction, right? The family can want a person to get sober all they want, but if that person's not ready, hasn't hit their bottom, and is not ready to go get sober, it doesn't matter what the family wants. The family can't want it for you. You have to want it.
It's so true. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm glad
So
that you
there we
did.
are. Huh?
I'm glad that you did want it, and that you have worked through so many things for yourself, you know, from the purging to drugs, but mostly I think, you know, one of the worst addictions that we have is that addiction to the cult itself, and sometimes toward, I mean, we can be addicted to our family, right? You talked about the cult of one, right? And being able to let other people go and say, hey, you're an adult. I'm not responsible for you. You're responsible for you. And sometimes even having to detach with love, because sometimes we have to for our own protection from people who are just super toxic and never going to get better. So we all have to figure out what that looks like for ourselves. And I'm just glad that you're on the path. And it sounds like, so your mom is also out, and your stepbrother and stepsister are out.
Yes. Yeah.
That's all good news.
Oh my God. You know what? I'm really, really lucky. so many people come out of this and they have not one person in the world, not one. And so many people would give anything to be able to talk to their mom again.
Oh,
And I
sure.
get that. You know,
Sure.
I get to have that. And I don't know why some people get it and others don't. I would love to have my grandmother who won't speak to me. I would love to have my family back in Seattle. They don't want anything to do with me. Even my mom's family, the rest of her family who are witnesses, I am public enemy number one to them.
Oh, sure.
You
Oh,
know,
sure.
so I would love to have them, but I think a big part of this. Oh, just being okay with yourself and just.
I was going to say, some of the magic really happens when you can switch that over from worrying about they're disappointed in me, to flip that script and say, no, actually, I'm disappointed in them.
Yes,
They're the ones who have let me down. I didn't let anybody down. They have let me down.
Yes.
That is an interesting place when you can get there, because you start to realize that they're the unhealthy ones. They're the ones with the problems, let's say. They're the ones that need to come offer apologies to you, not the other way around. They're the ones that need to come back and say, oh, wow, I'm so sorry I treated you this way. I'm disappointed in my family. I'm not really worried about them being disappointed in me, because I haven't done anything. And I know that I haven't done anything wrong here.
You're not the one that's in a cult, are you?
No.
They are.
Yeah. I haven't shunned anybody. My address is the same. My phone number is the same. My email's the same. My Facebook is public. Y'all can reach out anytime, but I know you're not going to, and that's on you.
Yeah. You know, that's something it's so funny that you say that, because when I was in Wisconsin, when my dad was in the hospital and I was out there around my grandmother, who I just worshiped, you know, when I was a kid, she was my best friend. And, you know what? She is really awful. And, it kind of made me think of this line from The Office, which is my favorite show.
I love that show.
Where he says, when he's talking about Joe Bennett, and he says, you know, I spent all day trying to make her like me, and I forgot to ask myself, do I even like her? And that's exactly what popped into my head.
Yes, that is it right there.
Like, you know what? She is rude. She's conceited. She's racist, like super racist. I don't like her at all. And why am I so worried about how she feels about me? She should be worried about what I think of her. And she's not. And I don't like you. So
yes. There's some freedom when you start realizing that. You start realizing who these people really are, and you start looking at how they treat you or others, and you can start to say, ooh, really? I'm sorry, but I deserve better than that. I'm not going to put up with that. I deserve to be loved well, and I deserve to love myself well, and letting them treat me like this is not loving myself well.
Know your own worth.
Yeah.
And that's something that you're not taught as a witness. You are worthless.
Good for nothing. Slave of Jehovah.
Yeah, exactly.
Pummel yourself and lead yourself about like a slave, because the term slave is typically used in such good settings. When is the word slave used in a positive way other than Jehovah's Witnesses?
Well, there's a role reversal in the witnesses, wherein the faithful slave are actually the rank and file, and the publishers are actually the governing body, you know.
It's definitely an interesting, and I'm so glad that you've been able to get out. So you have your family today. You have this lovely little family unit. Do you have any dreams? Do you have things that you're enjoying today with the family that you have?
Well, I have moved out to Texas, where my husband is from. And his family is here. And I feel like I'm going to cry. They have really accepted me just with open arms, and they just treat me like a daughter and a sister. And I mean, I'm sure that they think that they have their own problems, but I think that they are the healthiest, most functional family I've ever seen in my life. and we just get to have holidays together, and we get to have family dinners together, and just spend time together, and there no one's screaming and no one's yelling, and there's no bad blood. And I feel like all my life I've been searching for a family, because mine was ripped away from me quite young. And and I have that now. And this is where I belong. I finally feel like I have found where I fit in, and it doesn't have to be anything too crazy. I mean, I don't need to be rich. I don't need to be famous. I don't need to live in a mansion. I'm just happy that I have my family, and that I have my little boy. And I think that is where I really, really see the hope. I just watching him like explore his world for the first time, just holding anything in his hand is like, oh, to him, it's like this huge deal.
It's amazing, isn't it?
I know. Wow. It shakes. Look at it. Yeah. So, I just feel like, now I'm really experiencing true love and acceptance. And I think it probably means more to someone like me, because of where I've come from.
Yeah. I'm glad that you have that. I mean, I think a sense of belonging, acceptance, love, that's what everybody's looking for in life, right? And it should be a fundamental building block of anyone's life. We all want that, but it's just, sadly, it's not. And sometimes we have to go find that where we can. And I'm so glad that you've been accepted into his family. And I think that's a beautiful thing. I often think about, I've always wondered, I'm a sports fan, and oftentimes you'll hear the song Take Me Home, Country Roads
Yeah.
by Bob Denver, or John Denver. Oh, I don't know.
John Denver.
John Denver. I don't know where I got Bob Denver from.
Cool.
But that song, it's, take me home to a place that I belong. That's what everybody is looking for, is that place where they belong.
Yeah.
And I think that's why that song resonates with so many people, people who are not even from West Virginia. I just always kind of been like, why are they singing it over here? I was watching a soccer match in the UK, I think, and they were singing that or something.
Oh, really?
Germany. Yeah, it was kind of a big deal. I don't remember. What was it? I don't remember what it was. That was the reason behind it, but they held this match over there and people were singing it. And it was just really cool to see, because I think in the end, it is about belonging. That's what we all want. And I'm glad that you have found it. And now you get to give that to your little boy, right? So that's really cool.
Yeah. And I'm really happy that now I get to kind of fill my mind with things that are important.
Yeah.
I talk to my dad sporadically, and his brain is pickled by being an alcoholic, but it's also stupefied by a lifetime of a steady Watchtower diet.
Absolutely.
That is such dumbed down nonsense. And now when I read it, I'm like, I can barely comprehend it. It's so stupid and badly written. But now I get to experience all kinds of knowledge, I really enjoy learning about physics and space and astrophysics and all of these really cool things about the physical world and things that, we don't really know everything about. I just, that is so fascinating to me. And if I was a witness, I wouldn't be able to spend my free time listening to a podcast, by Neil deGrasse Tyson. I would be listening to, the broadcast or, like I love that my mind is my own now. And I can fill it with things that are worthwhile, and I can help my child understand what critical thought is, understand how to reason properly. These are things that are not important to witness parents to teach their kids. Um, I'm just happy I'm going to be able to put him on the best possible track to, leave the world better than he found it, which is all any of us can really do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a perfect way to end. I mean, healthy
Awesome.
mom, healthy kid,
Yeah.
finding family and belonging. That's a beautiful thing. So I appreciate you telling your story, and I know it's going to help a lot of other people out there. I appreciate you being so open and vulnerable, because I know it's not always easy to talk about these things.
It's not, but it's kind of cathartic. So yeah, it feels good to
Absolutely.
get it out. And thank you for listening and being so great. Thank you for everything you do.
Oh, you're very welcome. And I think that's a great place to end.
All right.